right, good afternoon. Or howdy, Texas. All right, my first question before I introduce our panel is for the audience. Who here likes to win? Make some noise if you like to win. Yes. So we were joking on our prep call. This panel should really be called the Many Ways to Win. It should really be called The Many Ways to Win with Women, because we have an all-women panel. And I am so excited to guide this conversation among, you heard the music, this unstoppable group of women. So in preparation, I was reflecting on the work I've done on cash over the years. And over a decade ago, as you heard, I had the privilege of serving in the Obama administration as director of the Office of Family Assistance. For y'all that don't know, that's the office that administers TANF. Supposed to be about cash, right? Let's get cash to the people. And that was a time, do y'all remember Hope and Change? Hopey Changey? There was so much energy around hope and change, right? Some of you were around, some of you maybe it was your first election. Fast forward to 2024, we entered a very different era, y'all. It was an era of change, just not the hopey-changey kind, right? It was despair and destruction is what it felt like to a lot of us. So we might not be in a very hopeful federal moment, but I remain hopeful. Why? Are you crazy? Why, Nisha? Why are you hopeful? I am hopeful because you're going to hear from this group of women. The momentum for cash policies continues to build in states, in local communities across the country. And we're going to hear stories today about the many different paths to victory, each of them with a different strategy to meet this moment. So, as we all know, last year Congress passed what I call the big ugly bill, right? Some people call it beautiful. I think it was ugly. And it resulted in the largest cash transfer, right? That's what tax bills are about. Cash transfer in American history. The problem was the cash went in the wrong direction, right? It all went up to the people that already have a lot, siphoning money away from the safety net with tax cuts for corporations and people that already have a lot of money. So, Marcy Bowers is here to tell us how in Washington State, they took that challenge head on and they said, we're gonna be the first state in the country to pass a millionaire's tax. So we're gonna hear about that. Okay. And then we're gonna hear from Andréa Comer, who will share how Connecticut, so we got lots of states here, y'all. We're gonna go from all the way in Washington State back to Connecticut. Connecticut is tackling the racial wealth gap by implementing, actually not just talking about it, implementing baby bonds, a policy that is so popular, some people are over here trying to repackage it and act like they invented it, okay? Yet the same camps, right? They're now loudly out here talking about early wealth building, while quietly, not so quietly maybe, they were mounting attacks in states to try to ban cash. And I heard like here in Texas, they were like trying to ban giving out gift cards. Okay, so, and what did Texas say? Texas said, nope. Joining us are Ivanna Neri and Ashleigh Hamilton, and they're gonna break down that fight. All right here in Texas. You got a little preview of that. And then rounding out our group is Aidan Davis, and she's gonna share how ITEP, right? Tax policy wonky, you're thinking. You're gonna hear how they've transformed research and data engagement. They are producing the spreadsheets behind the movement. Like, I think I'm imagining like spreadsheets turning into swords, right? Playing a vital role in state policy wins. All right, so Ivanna, I'm gonna kick it to you first. And over the past 3 years, we've seen this movement from the right nationwide to try to ban direct cash, successfully, unfortunately, in some states. But here in Texas, they lost. So how did y'all build a winning coalition, defeat that anti-GI legislation here in Texas, where people said, nah, it can't be done? Tell us.
Yes, and hey everyone, welcome to Austin. So UpTogether, we've been around since 2001, but doing work here in Texas since 2018. So it's been about 7.5 years. And one of the things that we've invested from day one is in relationships with philanthropy, with local governments, with community members, with grassroots organizers, So when we learned that there was no one, not two, not three, but 4 bills that were trying to ban guaranteed income at the end of 2024, it was really easy in a way for us to bring a coalition together because those relationships were already there. So although the work came together in 3 months, the reality it was that there was a lot of relationship building for the last 7 years. So what we did is that we, brought different players in the space. So one of them being the Economic Security Project, which really brings this national infrastructure in C4, which was very important because that's how we were able to also have a lobbyist. And then the other one was to bring our partners from Every Texan, which is a regional Texas-wide organization that focuses on policy change and had deep relationships with policymakers across the state. And then UpTogether, we had the relationships with more than 40,000 people who had received cash through the 7 years that we've been across the state. So when that happened, we came together and we tapped into those relationships that we had with community organizers to say, hey, this is happening, we need to come together and take action. So, the trust was already there, and I think one of the main lessons that we learned is that you cannot really build a coalition in the middle of a crisis. There is a lot of work that needs to happen prior to that, so kudos to everyone who right now is taking the time to build those relationships because that is critical for whatever fight we have ahead. So, thank you. So we were able to bring together about 50 families from across the state, from El Paso, from San Antonio, from Dallas, of course here from Austin. And the key to all of this was that, one, they had already the experience receiving cash. So they were trusted. And then we had, again, those relationships with grassroots organizations, ESP, and Every Texan. So each of us knew what was like the expertise that we were bringing at the table and knew that the greatest asset that we had was really the lived experience from the families. So we really just created a space for them to come together. And there were a couple of things, one of them was that thankfully we had funding together to be able to do the fight, which I just want to name because oftentimes a lot of us who are in the space have to do this unpaid work, and we were lucky that we, to some extent, had the funding to be able to, arrange travel and being able to bring everyone together. So today we're so proud to say that we were able to defeat 4 bills in the state of Texas. In a state that many people wouldn't believe this was possible. So, we're really proud to say that we're setting the stage for other states to follow.
Amazing. So I hope you heard in Ivanna's remarks, right, like how many different constituencies were involved. Probably every person in this room is part of one of those constituencies, right? So just keep that in mind. Okay, Ashleigh, I'm gonna go to you next because you were actually part of that winning coalition here in Texas. And you are actually one of those folks who you started your journey as a participant in UpTogether's direct cash work. Today, you are leading the expansion of the Destination Home program right here in Texas. I actually have 2 questions for you. So I want to ask you, one, what inspires you to become the leader that you are in this coalition to fight for guaranteed income? And then we have a whole bunch of folks in the room who also have been participants in GI programs, 50, maybe more folks, who might want to get more engaged. So what advice would you give them? So what inspired you? What advice do you have for others?
Okay, you will probably have to remind me of the second question, but I will start with, I think for me, it really started with being on the other end, receiving support. I like to say that I was blessed to be a part of an organization, Communities of Color United for Racial Justice. Woo! Small plug. No, but seriously, I think being a part of a community that I really knew nothing existed. First of all, let me just say this. I don't want to perform for y'all. I have all these talking points, but I do better when I can just speak real. So I hope y'all allow me to just speak real. Okay, so let me just put this down. I got to be a part of an organization that, like I said, doesn't make you perform. I have small memory of how I even found it. I would like to shout out Kelly Coleman, She saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and she was just like, hey, come be a part of this community. Through that organization, I was able to get help through UpTogether. This was during COVID. Yes, the cash helped, but I think what really stood out to me was how it was given. It was cash. It wasn't, hey, prove to me that you're struggling. It wasn't make sure that you jump through all of these hoops to ensure that you can get this assistance. It was like, I know that you're in crisis, and the last thing that I want to do is be able to add more to that. That was something that I truly appreciated. Being able to participate in an organization that not only said, hey, I see you, but I trust you. I think a lot of the programs right now, we stop at trust, right? And really and truly, when we do that, we cut off so much of what's able to be discovered. Because if we're being honest, I don't think people really take into consideration what it takes to actively make decisions in crisis. When you're in survival mode, what does that look like? That is a type of cognitive intelligence that programs and organizations choose to ignore. And I want to be very clear about that, because that is a choice. That is a choice that we are making when we count out how people make decisions. They're having to move through and navigate different programs and get from point A to point B without having a connector, but you still somehow made it all the way to Z, and nobody ever stopped to say, well, how did you make that happen? Not one single time, right? Won't go off onto a tangent. Reel it back in.
You're good. You're good.
With that being said, I think that where it really shifted for me was at this same time last year, I had the opportunity to testify at the Capitol. Myself and 49 participants spoke in front of legislation, right, at the Capitol, and testified to the point of, we are real humans. And even on that day, I was still confronting, it was like, hey, you should pull yourself up by your bootstraps and make it happen, and if you don't, then you're lazy. And I said, well, hold on. I want to push back on that, because I'm everything but lazy. I'm a single mom working 3 jobs, going to school, and still trying to make ends meet in an economy that doesn't support me. Please don't talk to me about work. Please don't talk to me about sacrifice, because if anybody has sacrificed, I have. It was at that moment that this work shifted for me. And I feel like I remember the second part of the question.
Okay, go for it.
What would I tell folks? I would say all my participants, all my people who are not in C-suite roles, you are an average person like myself, because don't get it twisted. Even though I am running this program with ECHO, it's a homeless prevention program right at home, Austin, right? And I'll talk about that later. But what I would encourage you is don't underestimate the power your voice holds, the power your story carries, right? Because in doing this work, you gotta think, the programs that are being designed are by people that are the furthest removed from what they are trying to implement. They have no idea what it takes. Your story is data. Your story is direction. Your story is how they get it right. So what I would encourage you to do, if there was anything, get involved. Your story lives in this work. Find ways to participate. There's organizations that will support you. There's organizations that you could be a part of, ways to plug in. Make sure your voice is heard. That's exactly what I'm doing at ECHO with the Right at Home initiative, right? We've spent time, which a lot of people wait until the end, to bring in community. Here, I said, nope, right from the beginning. Right from the beginning. Because how dare I step into community and say, hey, this is what community needs, and I haven't involved them at one step in the process. So we are including them from the very beginning, making sure voices are not only just heard and extracted for their data, their stories, and then pimped out, right? We're making sure that we are embedding that in the program and making sure that they have power within the program to say not only what has worked, but more so what didn't work. And even more importantly, what harmed me in the process. Because a lot of the programs that are built today aren't built for people that are, again, actively in survival mode, just trying to look it out without any penalties.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love it, Ashleigh. You didn't just answer the question. You're like showing people the way by what you do. I love it. All right, so some of you were here 2 years ago, and at this conference we had a similar panel, but it was all government officials talking about how their offices were advancing cash policies. So we were together, some of us were together 2 years ago in Detroit, reimagining the safety net. At the same time, people at the right were huddled up drafting plans to gut it, right? That plan, also known as Project 2025. Boo, boo. And today, the people in power are rapidly and ruthlessly implementing that plan, right? Slashing the safety net, redirecting resources to the rich, but they are losing on affordability. And I know people are tired of hearing that word, but they're losing. So what are they doing? They're like, well, let's take some of these ideas and repackage them. Like direct cash, baby bonds, let's put a new wrapper on it and try to get some support back. So I want to go to you, Andréa. Why do you think people in other camps have run with so-called Trump accounts? And can you help us understand, because I think there's some confusion out there, how are these accounts different from baby bonds, which is what you're actually implementing in Connecticut?
So first, thanks for having me, and also thanks for having me follow Ashleigh, because that's... I'll try to keep it entertaining. So I guess the first thing is I want to say, because out of fairness, right, the baby bonds legislation that was passed in Connecticut, we're the first state to pass baby bonds legislation. It was with the support of both sides, both Democrats and Republicans, and we can talk about why that matters later. However, there is a real distinction between baby bonds and Trump accounts. I'll start with baby bonds. $3,200 for every child whose birth was covered by our state Medicaid program goes into an account or a trust. Any child that was born after July 1st, 2023, that investment is made. Once they turn 18 to 30, they can take that money out, which at that time it's going to be worth between $11,000 and $24,000. They use that money, they can invest in or start a business. They can put down towards a house, pay for education, save for retirement. So that is baby bonds. You don't have to sign up for anything. There's some challenges and opportunities with that, but we can talk about that as well. But on the flip side, you have the Trump accounts or 530A accounts. Trump accounts is, to be clear, a vanity project. It is time-bound. It is only for kids born during this particular administration. It is $1,000 that goes into an account. You have to sign up for it while you file your taxes. There's a climate that has been created in this country where the folks who probably need that $1,000 most will not sign up for it out of fear because this administration has created that climate of fear. So that's already going to limit the number of people that participate. But for those who do, this is not about building wealth for and trying to address the wealth gap. That's what baby bonds is doing. What the Trump accounts is doing is two things. One, $1,000, when you turn 18, then you can take it out. If you are a poor family that cannot afford to put any more dollars in that $1,000 is then about $5,800. If you are a family that can afford to put the max $5,000 in, when that child turns 18, that's $303,000. That's doing nothing to address the wealth gap. What's even worse is they're now talking about letting folks like Elon Musk donate shares of their stock of their companies into these accounts, which allows them to then avoid having to declare capital gains. So this is all about making the haves have more and the have-nots be static. So I hope that people really understand the distinction between the two. Now, what I will say is, just because that is what it is, we are not trying to dissuade families from taking access to that $1,000, because that $1,000, along with the money that the Dells have committed, that Ray Dalio has committed, that can all grow. But we need to be clear and be honest about what the end game is.
Thank you, thank you. I want to ask you a quick follow-up. So based on what you are implementing in Connecticut, we do have other folks in this room who are with local governments, legislators, advocates. What advice do you have for them if they're trying to develop policy that's equitable, similar to what you're doing in policy that actually does close the wealth gap?
Sure. So again, you know, I think that the fact that families don't have to do anything. We have a memorandum of understanding with our Department of Social Services. They give us the information on what baby's birth was covered by, what our state's Medicaid program is called Husky. So parents don't have to do anything. The challenge with that is because they don't have to do anything, we can't automatically just reach out to them. We need them to opt in. And that's important because we know that just putting $3,200 into a bank account or into a trust for a child is not going to shield them from all the things that can happen on their journey from birth to 18. Families are in crisis, as Ashleigh talked about, right? And so what we're also trying to do is work with our, nonprofit organizations, folks in housing, folks in criminal justice, all across, in health, all across the board, so that and they are our ambassadors, they are our trusted ambassadors, so they will, they are sort of the trusted messengers, if you will, between the baby bonds families and us. Because we also know that folks who are in crisis don't necessarily trust government. We have not made it so that they feel like we are somebody that's automatically going to help them. So what are the different ways in which we get that information? It's from those trusted messengers, like all of you out here, who then let us know what families need, and hopefully we'll get them to interact with us so that we can, in fact, have direct conversations about what it is that they need, because the last thing that we want to do, to Ashleigh's point, is set a table for them and just assume what it is they want to eat. In terms of the actual development of the policy, so I have to say that when we came in 2023, the Treasurer Eric Russell and the team and I also want to ask my colleague Jen to stand up, because we would not have baby bonds legislation if it wasn't for her. She wrote the law. She now manages the program. And the language was really important. Making sure that this money that went into this account for these babies was not, did not trigger a benefits cliff for folks. Because that was a big fear, like, oh, do I get this $3,200 that I can't even do anything with now? Is that gonna kick me off of my, my benefits? So when we came into office, I think it was maybe within the first week, one of our local newspapers wrote this whole story about baby bonds being dead. I was like, and our treasurer had run on getting baby bonds done because it was passed the year before we came into office, but it was supposed to be funded through bonding, and the governor was not interested in funding through bonding. We can talk about that as well, because he's a good governor, but perspective is everything. And if you don't know what it's like to be poor, then you don't know what it's like to be poor. And so I called up the governor's chief of staff at the time, and I was like, if this is really dead, then please tell me so that we can figure out what we're gonna do. And it came down to personalities. It came down to, again, perspective, people not understanding, how this could make a difference. It came down to politicians, for the most part, are pretty self-centered and can be selfish, and they want to be able to demonstrate that they've made an impact now, right? This is not a sprint. This is not a now thing. This is a marathon. And so what we know we need to do is to prove or to verify proof of concept even before those kids turn 18. So that's where the work of our advocates come in. That's where the policies and procedures come in. We ultimately were able to find a different way to fund the program, and so the governor came along and we were able to kind of get it done. But I would say to those who are looking to develop policies, A, get you a Jen. B, Make sure you can identify money. I also sit as chair of the Social Equity Council, which is designed to ensure equity in the cannabis space in Connecticut. So we talked about maybe using revenue for that. Try and figure out where the revenue sources are, because again, politicians are going to be reluctant to say, yes, we're going to pay $300 million for this program that we may not see the benefit of for nearly 2 decades.
It's good. I'm glad you, yeah, thank you. I'm glad you used the word revenue, because that's the perfect transition. Revenue, right? Anybody that studied French, to come back. Bring that money back to the people. So Marcy, in Washington State, you were also focused on putting cash in families' pockets, but you took a different approach. And you came up with this millionaire's tax idea. So tell us about that. How did you land on that campaign? How did you bring the folks together to make that happen?
How long do I have? I mean, I think it's really probably clear to most of you who've tried to work on revenue or cash that all of these things are a long time in the making. So to sort of say oh, in the last year we landed on a thing, that would not be real. I think one thing I want to sort of shout out is that people in our state, smart people like my friends Tracy and Leela over there, have been pushing stuff like a wealth tax and really trying to talk about super progressive ways to bring in revenue, and most of those have been dead on arrival for years. But just talking about those types of things pushed our legislature to be well, okay, we're a little nervous about taxing wealth, because that really addresses people where the real money is. What if we taxed high income? And that was something that we could actually run with. But I think it's actually quite practical. We've already had reference to HR 1. Most states are in really tight budget situations right now. We can't mitigate the harms of HR 1 and continue investing in our communities and making sure that we have schools and roads and all of the things that we all want in our states. We can't do that without some more revenue. In order to fund what is coming from HR 1 and those looming cuts, we have to come up with money, or we will be cutting it from something else we care about. So over the last year, we merged some cash-related coalitions. We had a tax credit coalition, we had a guaranteed income coalition, we had a TANF coalition. We merged all of those and then started working really closely with our revenue coalition. So we had to be ready. We had to be really ready for, okay, this session, it might happen. We have some interested legislators. Our Senate Majority Leader was very excited about the possibility of taking this to voters in the fall. But it meant he was really engaged and excited about it. So we landed on it for really practical reasons, but I think the other big part of it was, I'm gonna stay neutral on how I talk about our governor. He has opinions, and he likes to do things his way, usually via press conference, not a phone call. Okay, so I guess I am going to tell you something about the governor. But he said he was really skeptical about this millionaire's tax, and he said basically, we can do this if you find a way to put more money back in working families' pockets. Okay, if you insist. But it meant our cash coalition, our direct cash coalition, had to be really ready. And we needed to be ready well in advance of the legislative session to be able to say, these are the things we want to support. So I won't go into all the back and forth around how that all came to be, but I do think it's really important to say, we all knew from the jump that cash was what was underlying everything. Our top priority was we're not gonna pit cash against other things we care about. And we know that cash is part of how we're going to support working families through this. So what we ended up with, starting in 2029, so I wish I could tell you it's starting tomorrow, but it's not. Starting in 2029, we will tax income over $1 million at 9.9%. Go ahead, this is exciting. Previous to now, Washington State didn't even have an income tax. So the idea that we're going from no income tax to a tax on millionaires is in the words of Joe Biden, a big fucking deal. Okay, so, And where we landed on how to get money back in people's pockets was to expand the working families tax credit. So I just told you we didn't even have an income tax. So when we wanted to do a state EITC, we had to be really, really creative then too, and create something that didn't really make sense to call it an earned income tax credit because there's no income tax. And so we created that. I won't go into that story. That's a whole other panel that we could have. We created that modeled loosely around eligibility, in particular to the federal earned income tax credit. It also includes ITIN filers from the jump. I think to Ashleigh's point about you design your stuff with community in the beginning so you don't get it wrong later. You know what it's hard to do? Fix stuff after a whole bunch of legislators have already voted on it. It's much easier to say, you know what, we're gonna bring in ITIN filers from the jump, and that is our bottom line. We will not support this bill if you don't do that. It's much easier to do that than later come back and try and add them. Again, sorry, I was gonna be brief. And then with that, the millionaire's tax, it's estimating to bring in about $3 billion a year. And it will expand the working families tax credit in two really important ways. The first is that it will make it eligible for anyone over the age of 18, regardless of whether or not they have a dependent. So the federal system says if you're 18 to 20, I always get this number wrong, 25. Okay, Tracy's nodding yes, I got this right. If you're 18 to 25, you must have a dependent in order to access this credit. And then you really don't get anything after 65. And we know that there are people who are over 65 who are still working and not making ends meet. So now anyone over the age of 18, regardless of dependence, can access the program. And then the second one is we moved eligibility up the income scale and tied it to something called the standard of need, which is a Washington-specific piece, and it has an inflation adjuster. Okay, for the policy nerds in here, that means it goes up every year.
Sexy, inflation
so
adjuster.
Sexy, I know. Kind of taken together, that means that over 1 million Washingtonians will now be able to access the credit. So more money, less age restrictions, and we're going to pay for it with a tax on millionaires.
Winning. All right, so continuing this winning streak, I want to go to Aidan. So, we often hear about it's important work that organizers are doing, that policymakers are doing, that advocates are doing. We often don't see researchers in this. Often researchers are a little bit at arm's length, not in the coalition, and even intentionally so, sort of like, we're neutral, we're just the data people over here. But you've really thought about and done your work differently in ITEP and really made yourself a key ally for state coalitions trying to push forward these wins. So can you talk about how you all show up differently to support these coalitions?
Yeah, so different from some researchers, we definitely don't feel removed from the wins. I would say, especially recently, we get pulled in to give expert testimony in front of lawmakers or showing up in the media, or we're being cited by lawmakers or even governors in the states. And there's this great example that still gets me a little emotional when I think about it. When Governor Ferguson signed the millionaire's tax, which was the first income tax in 35 years that's been created, so it was such a huge success. And also, massively expanded their working families tax credit. He cited our work, and I totally got emotional in that moment, and I was like, this is kind of embarrassing, anyway. So I felt like we had our fingerprints on it, even though it's a little piece of the big piece of work that's happening with all the advocates and the researchers in the state on the ground doing that work. So there is that ownership and connection that feels very real. But the thing I'll say is that it's more often, it's not really the norm. I think the way that we usually operate is to be much more behind the scenes. And I know you mentioned that RED likes to call us the spreadsheets behind or powering the movement. And I think that's a really good way to put the way that we do our work. So the way that we operate and our kind of organizational structure is we do work in 50 states, and in most years we achieve that. We're able to, touch on policy in every single state. And the way to do that as a national organization has to be grounded in, this feels like a theme throughout the entire day, in so much trust. So we have to have so much trust in our partners, and they need to be able to trust us. And so that's how we do the work. So the way it works is all these partners across the country and the states, a bunch of them, I see you guys out in the audience, they let us know when things are bubbling up in the states, the types of policies that are being discussed, the things that have legs and seem possible and could move in any given year. And then we do our thing. We use our model to show, how much revenue it could raise, who it's going to help across the income scale, who it's going to help by race and ethnicity. We give them all this data and information about who else has done that across the country to help make the case even further for that policy. And strategic guidance about learnings from other places, what we've seen go well, the different arguments that have pushed against those ideas in those states, so they're prepared. And then we have to, again, put our trust in partners because we hand that off and they run with it. And we have to trust them to do good with those data and all that strategic advice that we provide. And lucky for us, we just happen to have the best possible partners ever. And so more often than not, that's what happens. They're able to move these really good policies, get these wins, or stop really bad things from happening, which is also a big part of the work. Yeah, it's awesome. We have a good group. And then the other thing, aside from trust, or in addition to trust, is I think just being really responsive. I think that's super key. And so for us, our partners are needing to engage with the media or with lawmakers or with coalition partners. And especially during legislative sessions, you have to do things at the snap of a finger. So we need to be really readily available and get information to people quickly so they have that right at their fingertips so that they can go into those rooms with people of power feeling confident and ready to use the information and just really tell a story. And so I think just being responsive, having trust that's mutual both ways, and then also knowing our lane. I think as we're solely a tax policy organization, and so that allows us to get really deep into the weeds, and we do that so everybody else doesn't have to, right? Yeah. So I think that's so important. It's just really knowing your lane and where you can show up, add value, and give the tools to people to just move the work and trust that they're going to do it and they're going to do it well.
So I want a quick follow-up though, just hearing that, Aidan, because you all do analysis, you got those spreadsheets for all 50 states and hopefully DC where I live. If somebody in this room has just heard what Marcy talked about and they're like, could we get a millionaire tax going in our state? I need a spreadsheet. Can they call you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would love nothing more.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that we really like to do is we do a lot of revenue menus and different progressive revenue ideas and revenue raisers, and it's going to vary by state and wherever you live. So we're happy to work with you to think that through.
So your data doctor on call right there. Okay, get her number. Okay, so I am amazed by the work all of you all are leading, what you're doing, what you have done, but it's not done, right? It is ongoing. And this room, all of us right here, we want to grow a national cash movement, right? A movement that is ready to govern in 2029. And we want the people beyond this room bought in. So let's talk about let's look to the future, where you think the opportunities are. So 2 years ago, prenatal to 3 was a big focus at GI Now, and it's exploded since then, right? Babies, babies, babies. We love babies. We love kids. Is that where you're continuing to build baby bonds? Are there other avenues, other transition points for people that you're focused on? And I want to start with you, Ivanna.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the things that you're mentioning, like prenatal, RX kids, we're so behind in Texas because we've been in this defensive mode. So I think for us, the opportunity is just opening to actually look into those things and grow that work. At the same time, we're being proactively strengthening our relationships with communities, as we know, there are potentially going to be bills in 2027 that are going to be introduced that are trying to kill the movement again. So we are strengthening those relationships with ESP, with every Texan. All of us are doing our homework. And then in the meantime, I think, thinking through with philanthropy and local governments, how to invest in people where the systems are failing. And I know you're probably thinking all the systems are failing right now. You're right. But at the same time, we know that there are communities and populations that are always gonna be left out from traditional systems, such as people who are undocumented, people who might be justice impacted. So I think for us, it's really like doing it not because we're meeting the moment, but finding sustainable paths to actually continue pushing that work forward. So that's how we're thinking. And then in Austin, for example, we've, for the last 3 years, we've been having the city of Austin being one of the few cities across the country putting general dollars into cash assistance. They call it the Family Stabilization Grant Program. And right now, because of what's happening at the federal government, they are having to make these tough decisions in terms of how to allocate and resource those efforts. So we're trying to make sure that, that continues, because on the other side, we're fighting so that local municipalities can continue doing that type of work. So everything is happening at the same time, but I think for us, the fight is not over. If anything, we are stronger together, and we will keep it up.
Ashleigh, what about you? Because you're also in Texas. What would you add? And you've got a whole program you're standing up. Do you want to talk about that?
I do. I will say that right now, honestly, people aren't failing. They're just stretched, right? You got folks working, taking care of their families, doing everything within their power, but the math isn't mathing at this point. We should acknowledge that. And I'm going to try my very best not to go into a history lesson. But I think this is the perfect opportunity for us to really build on humanizing people again. And that's me nicely putting it. Because if we want to explore, let's take a look at the history of dehumanizing people, specifically Black and brown folks, and how that shows up in the programs that we run, the things that we implement. It's very present, right? Again, I'm trying to speak nicely. I don't want to make anybody upset.
$5 million. Your $5 million.
My $5 million program is coming to Austin, not mine, but I get the opportunity to show you what it's like to come full circle in this moment. Again, I started receiving assistance and being a participant in this program, and now I'm leading the $5 million program here in Austin. Thank y'all for the applause, but I feel like the better part of that statement I didn't get to mention is how we are intentionally doing things different. How people have been traditionally excluded from programs, those exiting the criminal justice system, those that may be undocumented, those that may be work in Black and brown families. Please don't get me started on the man of the house rule. All of the things that they are now using against us to counsel us out of programs are things that they implemented to begin with. But that's not a conversation that we're ready to have. I want to take it back to what we can do in this movement right now is begin to humanize people again. It was never that we didn't know what to do with money. We just needed the opportunity to show you what we've been doing with nothing. If you give me a little something, I can show you what I can make happen with it.
I know, I'm sorry to make y'all follow her, but somebody has to, so.
I'm gonna start going last.
Aidan, what would you add? Where is ITEP going next with your spreadsheets? Where are you taking them?
Yes. So I will say that the character of the debate has changed a bit, which I think we all know with what passed last summer. So at the state level, which is where I do my work, the budget outlooks, they aren't as rosy. And so over the past 5+ years, I've had the opportunity, and a lot of people in this room, to on the tax side, which is where I do my work, to really move the creation of child tax credits in a bunch of states to increase EITCs. There's just been all this movement around these refundable credits, which is incredible. But now that we're in a situation where budgets are more strapped, states that want to do these policies that are more than just token relief are looking for pay-fors. And so it's kind of like the Washington style over here. And so that's where I think our value add is pretty helpful, and that's the revenue options and all the different things that we can provide, because if states are gonna be able to do that, the hope is that they're not gonna cut back on education or infrastructure or all the things that they're already providing, but that they're gonna pass progressive revenue that asks more of people with the most to be able to fund these programs. And so we're really focused on identifying ways to help folks do that. And I will say the biggest wins that we've seen this year have done just that, which is like a pretty good precedent. So in Oregon, I'll just point that out, they opted to not piggyback on a bunch of the federal tax cuts that were gonna be passed through to their state tax code, and instead, they decided that they were gonna boost their EITC this year. And then that's also been the case in DC, Washington, Maine, progressive revenue raisers paired with really targeted refundable tax credits that are gonna provide meaningful relief for families and families with young kids. So I think it's an incredible model, and we're just gonna do more of it.
Awesome. Okay, so to close us out, I'm gonna go down the line to my left here, and I'm gonna ask you all, what should the cash movement learn from your state level wins in Washington State, in Connecticut, and Texas that should shape federal policy going into 2027, right? Let's think big. So go down. And that means, Ashleigh, you are gonna get the last word. And I know it's no pressure for you, it's like nothing, but.
Okay, so I'm really practical, and I think there's a couple practical things that states could do. I'm not sure how much this influences the federal policy, but I'm not into the federal policy right now. It's not serving us well. So a couple notes. One, I think, is the defending wins piece of it. So in Washington, we just did this great thing. We have to defend it at our state Supreme Court, and we will have to defend it at the ballot. So being prepared to say, we know we did something big, and we need to put our energy into making sure that we can defend that. So that's one thing, is sort of a like, we can't let off the gas when we get a win, right? I think Ivanna has already talked about the importance of defending things, right? And so I think in states, so that's one thing. And then I think in states where there's, it doesn't seem like there's a path, I think there's always work to be done administratively. So helping the increasing access, right? So streamlining processes, allowing for people to access different benefits through one application, those kind of things. You can always be working on that behind the scenes. And then one thing actually that leads into how our expansions worked is last year we ran this little bill that basically created the state need grant, or not the state need grant, sorry, the standard of need in Washington State. And at the time, people were like, why are you even running this? Like, this is meaningless. TANF is not gonna tie to this, which is what we really wanted. But we went ahead and did it anyway. And then lo and behold, this year, we have the opportunity to expand the Working Families Tax Credit, and we were able to peg it to a new, higher, more realistic thing. And so I think there's those little things that don't feel like they're making a difference, but they set the stage for something bigger down the line. There's probably more, but I think anything that we can be, I know what I want to say, is I think while we're in this hard policy moment, there are big wins in investing in the community members that are doing this work in partnership with us, right? I think one of the biggest wins on this whole panel, I love you all, I like me too, but I think one of the biggest wins is Ashleigh's story, right? It is that Ashleigh showed up and she kept coming back, and someone saw that spark and believed in her and gave her the platform to run with it, and boy, did she, right? And so I think those kind of wins we shouldn't ignore while we're like focused on the policy. We have the opportunity when policy is hard to invest deeply in our communities and in the leadership of those communities, and that's something we can win on regardless of the policy landscape.
Okay, awesome. All right. Okay, I'm gonna arrest you. I'm gonna challenge you to try to be like 30 seconds each.
Yeah, with 39 seconds left. Cool. So I guess what I will say is I talked about this being bipartisan. So initially, the pushback we got from around baby bonds was, this is a racial issue. This is, black and brown. Sure, and why not? Because history. But the way we were able to turn that on its head was we ran the numbers, found out that there's 169 municipalities in Connecticut. We have baby bonds, babies in every single one of those municipalities. So we handed that data to our policymaking friends on both sides of the aisle and was like, if you want to go tell your constituents that their babies don't deserve this $3,200, okay. And so we got it passed.
I think for us, resistance, despite the fact that everything sometimes feels like it's against you as we were trying to do the work, but I think what kept us going was, again, those relationships that we had and the resistance to, knowing that we have the power to destroy and be able to defeat those policies across the state.
I'm going to go before Ashleigh because she should end. I don't want to be the last one. So states are innovators, and I would say that the work in the wins that we're seeing right now and that are going to continue should be a lesson to the federal government of what they could do. And I think what we're going to see more of are reclaiming the revenue that's been lost in giveaways to corporations and the rich through these tax cuts. And states are going to reclaim it, and they're going to find ways to give it back to people in cash, especially for folks at the low end of the income scale who really need that revenue. So I think just like learning lessons from the states, we are going to teach the federal government the path forward.
All right, Ashleigh, bring us home.
Okay, maybe not 30 seconds. Okay, they gave y'all all of the technical takeaways, things that we can aim for. I am going to encourage you to challenge the system. I'm going to encourage you to push back. And the main way that I can encourage you to do so is start looking at your data and the way that you tell the story differently. There is something triumphant, there is something magnificent of people coming out of struggle. Please stop telling that sad story of how we've been struggling all our lives, because that's not the end of it. Start talking about how when you take a person from survival crisis mode to now benefiting and thriving, what is that story like? Because I'm living testimony of what that could be, okay? I'm telling you that it could be more than just, hey, she's not paying her bills, we don't know what to do. Stop allowing them to make you fit into that bubble, play the game that they want you to. You'll never win in a system that wasn't built for you, so start getting strategic with how you play. And that starts with changing the narrative.
Thank you. You're good. The only thing I will say is I hope you are feeling as inspired as I am. Please join me in thanking our fabulous Unstoppable panel.